I have to start with many thank yous. First and foremost, Subhashish, for doing this report. Very much needed. And I think the for all companies, as Mr. Damodran said, it's always been important. But as we see changes coming at us, which are unpredictable and coming at us fast and furious, I think having a very well thought through risk management system has become more and more imperative. Um, when I look back at my career and I think of all the mistakes that were made, uh, instances where one looked back and said we could have done better, the bottom line missing element was really having not looked at all the risk factors. And I think it was maybe Mukesh who said, or Ritu, that we tended to look at risks really from a financial point of view. That's in the DNA of a lot of corporate leaders, and that doesn't take into account many of the risks that one needs to look at. So, from the perspective of a financier, typically we spend, I would say, 80% of our diligence on financial aspects, operational aspects, and you know, I would say as an add on, we would look at things like maybe the organization, technical skills, financial skills. Rarely would we interview board members. Rarely would we look at, the second and third layer of bench that was there for succession planning. And things like environment, social, governance aspect was for a long time a tick the box. I remember as a young investment professional in IFC, when the then CEO of IFC, and this is back in 1997, um, said that sustainability and ESG elements had to be part and parcel of the way in which we look at investments. All of us threw up our arms and said, we're already bureaucratic and not competitive, and this is like a huge millstone around our neck. And he turned around and told us, a few years from now, you're going to thank me because this millstone is really going to be your ticket for the future. And he was 100% right. Today, I cannot imagine how any company can run its business without taking into account environmental aspects. And as we see extreme weather conditions, again, unpredictability. One of the CEOs of the largest global insurance company has said that if we cannot keep it within the 1.5 degrees targeted in terms of global temperature, most of these extreme weather events will become uninsurable. And then who do we turn to? Because insurance has always been sort of taken as the way in which we address risks. And if the large insurance companies are turning around and telling us that these extreme weather events are not going to be insurable, then we have a huge gaping um, risk staring at us, which there is no remedy for. Another aspect that, we thought, okay, we've been through the Cold War, we've been through the breakup of the erstwhile Soviet Union, we've been through several smaller wars, um, but things that we didn't really anticipate of what's happening today on the geopolitical front is again a huge risk, which is really difficult to predict. Just as we were talking about whether there could be really a war type situation between the US and China, given where Trump was headed. That seemed to sort of settle for a short while after he left. But then we have Russia and Ukraine and all of Europe and the entire energy equation, global energy equation thrown into a tizzy. And that's causing us to rethink a lot of decision making. So, the one thing that I'd say, Mr. Damodran, that you mentioned that risk was always there, what I see is that the pace, the unpredictability, the volatility, and the multifarious types of risks that are coming at us are really making us much more aware that we need to have someone in the organization who's firefighting not on just on a day-to-day basis, but more strategically and being able to think before these events hit us. Another risk factor that often gets sort of not taken into account, and here I look at Raghuram Rajan, who wrote about the third pillar, and he says how, you know, the state and businesses have come together and there's more of a collaborative working between the two. The government even asks our opinion on regulations. There's public consultation. So one would say that, you know, between the state and business, there is a dialogue and there is an opportunity for each side to express their logic. The element that has totally yet not been addressed is community. And this is the third pillar that Raghu refers to in his book. Post the pandemic, that has, I think, become even more acute. And this is one of those risks which all of us think of as somebody else's problem. You know, it's societal inequity, it's the fact that people are getting more nationalistic and more xenophobic. Uh, these are things which is difficult to translate, understand, interpret from a corporate perspective. But in my view, it's one of the huge risks that is there underlying, and the pandemic has only underscored that. So again, that brings me to my final point, which is, in my view, there's that aspect of risk as you've codified in this model risk code. There are checks and balances, processes. Um, I remember at CDPQ, which is Canada's second largest pension fund, in 2017, we decided that we are going to go public with our commitments on reducing carbon emissions and generating more green investments. And it was nice. Everybody felt good about it. We announced and we said, in fact, you know, and just let's keep this within the room, we did try in the beginning to get all the Maple 8, the large pension funds in Canada, to do this collectively. But there was a sense that, you know, do we really have to? Especially given that a lot of us had large oil and gas investments. So this would kind of shine the light on how are we building our portfolios for our pensioners, right? So we said, okay, let's do this ourselves, and we'll depend on stewardship and setting a good example to get the others follow. What then happened was that we had these targets, but we really saw the change when the performance on those targets was linked to the bonuses that we were paid. And what that did was that even the junior most analyst in our team started questioning why were we doing certain investments which was going to get us to breach those targets. And you had that bottom up alignment. And therefore, I think in terms of addressing risks and really bringing about systemic change, having that link to incentives is very, very critical. And, you know, all of you mentioned disruptions from technology, the fact that digitization has become so important. The counter aspect, I would say, is the whole issue of cyber security. And I can tell you that we in India are sitting naked on many, many fronts. Uh, Again, not to be quoted outside, but if you look at the transmission network, it's one of the easiest things to bring down with a cyber attack. And do we have the kind of cyber um, risk mitigation that is needed for these kind of huge infrastructure assets that today really have not been addressed? So that's another aspect, while we celebrate the India stack and the increase in digitization, I think we need to have an equally forceful cybersecurity risk mitigation approach. And linked to that is also data privacy. So this is something where, different countries have adopted different approaches. In India, we're still thinking about how we should approach it. And I think India could really be a leader in this area of addressing data privacy while giving access and becoming more digitized and taking advantage of the India stack. And the last point I would make is that with all the kind of risks that are there, one of the biggest elements that companies, big and small, startup, very well established, need is leadership. And often it's when there's absence of leadership that we find that risks overtake us. So I would say that all of us need, along with the model risk code, vaccination for braver leadership in terms of the bolder and risk intelligent decision making. Thank you.